name is Rashid Akil. I am the chair of the Citizen Review Board, and at this time, the February 28th, 2023 meeting of the Citizen Review Board is now called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will ask one to remain standing for a brief moment of silence in memory of our recent passing board member, Robert Irvin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will now ask our meeting clerk, Ms. Tanya Wilcox, if you will, please conduct the roll call.
Reverend Banks, Dr. Collins,
Present.
Tamayo,
Present.
Reyes,
Present.
Guy,
Present.
Akil,
Present.
Ingandela,
Present.
Valdez.
Present.
Thank you.
Let the record show all members of the Citizen Review Board are present with the exception of Reverend Banks. We will now move on to item 4 of the agenda titled the elections. The floor is open to any board members who wish to submit a nomination.
I'd like to nominate, Mr. Chair. I'd like to nominate Mr. Valdez as chair.
Mr. Valdez has a nomination for chair.
Our clerk is here, she'll help the process.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Nice seeing you.
Good evening, members. Shirley Fox Snow, City Clerk for the City of Tampa. We will now conduct the election for Chairman and Vice Chairman of the Citizen Review Board. Here are the election guidelines. The election of the chairman will be held first. Nominations do not require a second. Please wait to be recognized before nominating a candidate. I will open the nominations and close them after all nominations have been made. Votes will be counted by raising the hand. The vote will be taken in the order of the nomination, beginning with the first name nominated. The vote will cease as soon as there is a majority. Having said that, nominations are now in order for the chairman.
I'd like to
Yes.
nominate Mr. Valdez for chair.
Mr. Valdez has been nominated. Is there another nomination?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Akil for chair.
Mr. Akil has been nominated. Is there another nomination? We will close the nomination on Mr. Valdez and Mr. Akil. All in favor of Mr. Valdez, please raise your hand. Okay, that's 2. All in favor of Mr. Akil, please raise your hand. Okay. Mr. Akil, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you for the continuous support. It's been a pleasure to be in a position to serve the community of Tampa at large. I am fortunate to be able to serve with such a panel of members who share the same dedication, devotion, and from various backgrounds. I believe this panel represents the diversity of Tampa. And again, I am grateful to be able to fulfill my responsibility in the growth and success of our city under such leadership as our Mayor, Jane Castor, the City Council, the entire city staff and administration, including our Tampa Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a nomination for the vice chair? Yes.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Angandela.
Okay, Mr. Agandela has been nominated. Is there another nomination? Yes.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Reyes.
Oh, Mr. Reyes has been nominated. Is there another nomination? Okay, we will close close the nominations on Mr. Angandella and Mr. Reyes. All in favor of Mr. Angandella, please raise your hand. 1, 2. All in favor of Mr. Reyes, please raise your hand. Okay, that's 1, 2. Please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Mr. Reyes, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, real quick, thank you. It's my honor and my privilege to serve with all of you, and more importantly, to serve this community. I'm truly honored. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good meeting.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item 5, approval of the minutes from the meeting of January 24th, 2023. Are there any questions or provisions?
Just one. Mr. Chair,
Dr. Collins?
I did inquire once I got my minutes, and I'm sorry they were late. I wasn't able to send them in, so I've taken the responsibility for that. But I would like to indicate that because the January minutes reflect, I was late to the meeting, and I came in and was here when we were actually voting. It was at Roman numeral 4, but unfortunately, we were moving so fast. You indicated, please let the records reflect when we got ready to make a motion that I was here, and that was under Roman numeral 9. So what I'm saying is it might not be bad when any board members come in late, we kind of just pause then and indicate that they are here. So I would like the January minutes to reflect. It does not coincide with the tape, because the tape did have you acknowledging it, but because I check my minutes too and check when I come in. It was actually, I had been in discussions, and it showed that I came in on Roman numeral 9 rather than Roman numeral 4. So I'm going to recommend that the minutes reflect that if at all possible, but if not, as soon as the member come in, you might want to mention it then so that the tape will match their arrival.
Dr. Collins, we actually skipped around and we took number 9, so it may have looked like we were on number 4, but we were actually on number 9.
Yeah, but it did, in the minutes, it didn't show up until number 9, so it made it look like I had missed that
Well,
much.
no, it does, because number 9 moved up.
We had presentation that particular meeting.
Yeah.
So we moved item 9 up. So it appears that on item, when you was present under item 9, but item 9 was actually the next item on the agenda.
Okay, and it's not reflected. So what, you know what I'm trying to reflect, right? That I was here when we did the minutes, that's all. And for all board members when they are coming in, because we were probably in the discussion even if we moved it up. But I was here when we did the minutes, and I didn't get counted in because I didn't get the yay and nay to minutes, that's all.
He made the announcement while we were on item number 10.
Okay.
So for it to align with the video, I kept it.
And you were right. I was wrong for being late.
However,
I mentioned that, but I
however,
just wanted to be
on the
reflected.
minutes, it does states under approval of the minutes that Collins, Guy, and Valdez was absent.
That's
So
the
for
reason
that
I bring it
purpose,
up.
and she was present during the minutes. So for that purpose, I will agree with Dr. Collins in reference to adding that correction that she was present during the item 4 approval of the minutes. Any further discussion?
No.
I move to approve the minutes.
I second.
Board Member Leakin Tamayo has made a motion to approve the minutes of the Tuesday, January 24th, 2023 meeting. Board Member Colonel Reyes has seconded the motion of approval of the minutes for the Tuesday, January 24th, 2023 meeting. Any further discussion? We'll now continue with the vote. All those in favor, please show by raise of hand. Any opposed, please show by raise of hand. The motion passes. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 6, public comment. We have participants, excuse me, if you will, Colonel Reyes, can you please share with us the meeting guideline?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening. Please silence all electronic devices. The duties and the responsibilities of the Citizens Review Board are to review completed department investigations involving the use of force and cases of importance and interest to the community or the city. Determine whether the disposition of reviewed cases was consistent with department policies and procedures. Review matters of importance or interest and make recommendations regarding the handling of these matters. Determine whether any revisions or additions to department policy and procedures are appropriate in reviewing matters of or importance or interest, and report findings and recommendations to the mayor and the chief of police. Cases that are brought before the Citizens Review Board are closed internal affairs cases that have been investigated and brought to the police chief for disposition. It is the Citizens Review Board's job to review the cases and render an opinion as to whether the investigation was done according to department policies and procedures. The Citizens Review Board members are provided the investigative files in advance of the meeting. The Citizens Review Board will hear from the department whenever matters of interest or importance are requested for review by the board or the department. The coordinator for the board is Captain Patrick Mesmer. Any person who wishes to make a complaint concerning a matter which may be considered by the Professional Standards Bureau should see Captain Mesmer for information on how to file a complaint. The board should not discuss matters where the city or the department may likely be a party in litigation. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Colonel Reyes. As I call the names of the people who have signed up for public comment, I would ask that you approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you will, Joe Noava.
Hello, my name is Joseph Nohava. My address is 14432 Reuter Strasse Circle. And I'm here from Tampa Bay Community Action Committee on behalf of a person affected by TPD misconduct, one Kelsey Stornsky, who was assaulted by TPD officers Nicholas J. Hardesty and Adonis Morhan, pronouncing that right, in reference to case number 20-CF-000291, which occurred on 10/12/2019 at St. Joseph's Hospital, 3001 Dr. King Boulevard West. We would like this matter investigated by the CRB as a matter of police excessive use of force and a violation of professional codes of conduct as provided by 11B-27.0011. Yes, the person who will hopefully be here momentarily, herself, has written a statement giving further information about her case and the context of everything that led up to how she came to be in custody that night. And we've read it, and it's pretty clear, cut and dry, sort of abuse of authority and abuse of Florida statutes, particularly the Marchman Act, which as a mental health professional I'm a little familiar with. So basically the Marchman Act provides for potential inpatient treatment for substance abuse issues, right, for somebody that can't necessarily use their own judgment to need to enter treatment. So if their addiction progresses to the point of it being potentially fatal, they can get treatment. But there's certain provisions that were ignored in this person's case to the point that it seemed to be, well, for one, inappropriate, because this wasn't a person who was suffering from a substance abuse issue. This was just somebody that had been picked up one night because her friend rolled through a stop sign, and she was sort of left, or was going to be left on the side of the road alone, but I guess the officer decided to take her to St. Joe's Hospital because he thought she was an alcoholic. It doesn't make sense. And so, yes, this law, this Marchman Act was improperly applied in this case, 100%. And, yeah, we would just like it reviewed as a matter of, you know, both the improper use of that statute as well as, you know, again, the police, you know, professional conduct statutes. Yeah, it's very, very clear that, you know, this
Okay.
is not.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. We have the statements here, if we can sort of distribute them to you. I don't know if that's,
Yes, if
Something
you really
we
can
can do?
share it with the clerk.
Sure.
Ensure that we get a copy. Next, participant in public comment, Laura Rodriguez. If you will, please approach the podium. State your name and address for the record, and please limit your comment to 3 minutes.
All right, hello, my name is Laura Rodriguez. I live at 9606 North 12th Street. I'm here today on, as a member of Tampa Bay Community Action Committee and behalf on a person affected by TPD misconduct, Kelsey Storemski, who was assaulted by TPD officers Nicholas J. Hardesty and Ardonis Morajan in reference to case number 20 CF 00291. Which occurred on October 12th, 2019 at St. Joseph's Hospital on Dr. King Boulevard. I would like this matter investigated by the CRB as a matter of police excessive use of force and violation of professional codes of conduct provided in 11B-27.0011. I have been the person in contact with Kelsey Storemski. I've been a middleman acting for Tampa Bay CAC and the impacted person. And when I tell you that the effect that this still has on her, every moment that she thinks about this, she is brought back to the moment when her head was slammed into the tile floor over and over again. The pictures that she sent us of her bruises, a woman who is just my height, having a man sit on her neck, is something that there is no explanation for why that should happen. Why an entire body weight of 2 officers should be placed on her body. Why she was given a concussion, why she came out with PTSD from that incident, which you can read in the statement that we've handed to you. It comes with a full account of what she went through leading up to and after that event, and how she has systematically been ignored by the state, even by recently, the legal counsel for TPD told her that there is no other option for her, that she tried to file a complaint, but it was quote unquote too late to do so. She wasn't able to get CCTV footage at the hospital because it was too late. It should never be too late to get justice for her. She is someone who had never imagined that something like this could happen to her. And to be here in front of you guys today, I would like to remind everyone of the municipal code that was read out earlier to us. Something that I look at quite frequently, and it says that you can investigate even cases that don't have a discipline attached to it, which is one of those cases. And I implore you to listen to your community, listen to the members within it, and we are asking you to investigate this case for excessive force. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Taylor Cook, if you will, approach the podium. Please state your name and address for the record. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Taylor Cook. I live in District 7. I would prefer not to have my full address online, but it's on the sheet of paper. I'm with Tampa Bay Community Action Committee, and I also have the statement that we wrote where, sorry, that last comment really got me. But I'm here from Tampa Bay Community Action Committee on behalf of a person affected by TPD misconduct, Kelsey Staremski, who was assaulted by TPD officers, Nicholas J. Hardesty, and Adonis Morahan, in reference to case number 20 CF 000291, which occurred on 10/12/2019 at St. Joseph's Hospital, 3001 Dr. King Boulevard West. I would like this matter investigated by the CRB as a matter of police excessive use of force and violation of professional codes of conduct provided in 11B 270011. And that's our statement that probably everyone who speaks tonight will say. But I also wanted to add, I think I missed a couple meetings, but I've been to a lot of these meetings recently, and their turnout is really low, and I've been really involved, and Tampa Bay CAC has been really involved with the fight for independent counsel. And I think there's a reason why these things come up is because we want to see a CRB that actually holds the police accountable or investigates their misconduct issues. And I think, while I appreciate the cases that you guys do discuss, I think the public doesn't show out to these meetings or even know of this board's existence because they don't feel like it's helping. I feel like the CRB exists to Tampa citizens, especially in organizing in Tampa, and talking to people that live in Tampa. They don't see this board as something that's actually bringing transparency or accountability. So I think this is a really great opportunity to show that this board can bring transparency to the citizens of Tampa. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor Cook. Next participant, Kenya Sanchez. You will please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comment to 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Kenya Sanchez. My address is in the paper. So I'm just gonna read the statement, and enough has said for you guys to take action regarding the issue. I don't think I have to say anything because my peers have said enough. It's now in your hands to take all the words and everything that we have said and turn it into action. And if you guys don't take action, that's on you guys. Then we will see the lack of commitment that you have for our community. Hello, my name is Kenya, and I'm here from Tampa Bay Community Action Committee on behalf of the person affected by TPD misconduct, Kelsey Staremski, who was assaulted by TPD officers Nicholas Hardesty and Adonis Morahan. In reference to case number 20 CF 000291, which occurred 10/12/2019 at St. Joseph's Hospital, 3001 Dr. King Boulevard. I would like this matter investigated by the CRB as a matter of police excessive use of force and violation of professional codes of conduct provided in 11B-27.0011. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. Next participant, Sandra Zicki. If you will approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I'm gonna have him go before me.
State your name, approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
My name is Philip Freund, and my address is on the sheet of paper, though I came in a little late, so it might be on the sheet of paper that's still outside. And I'm here on the behalf of the Tampa Bay Community Action Committee on behalf of affected person Kelsey Staremski, who was assaulted by TPD officers Nicholas J. Hardesty and Adonis Morahan. In reference to case number 20 CF 000291, which occurred on October 12, 2019 at St. Joseph's Hospital at 3001 Dr. King Boulevard West. I would like this matter investigated by the CRB as a matter of police excessive use of force and violation of professional conduct, codes of conduct provided in 11B-27.0011. And I want to say that I read through the statement that was provided to you earlier, and what I've read in the statement, I think it was absolutely horrid what the police did to Kelsey, and I believe that you should investigate the situation and have justice be brought to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. We'll now ask Sandra. Okay. Approach the podium, please state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comment to 3
Hello,
minutes.
my name is Alvaro Montealegre. I live in Carwood, Tampa, and I am here on behalf of Tampa Bay Community Action Committee, and I support the request to the Civilian Review Board to investigate the case that we are talking about this young woman, Kelsey Storemski, being brutalized by Tampa Police Department. So thank you.
Thank you. I will now ask for the next participant. Please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comment to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Sandra Zickery. My address is 11248 Paddock Manor Drive, Riverview, Florida. I have 3 sheets of paper to read, so I won't take too much time, I hope. Hello, I am here today to address my ongoing concerns. A few weeks ago, Mayor Jane Castor and the state prosecutor both informed me that they're going to call me and schedule a meeting about this case. I have not followed up just yet because I'm seeking additional support from the CRB. For the last few weeks, it has been back and forth between myself and the Tampa Police. A detective in the Professional Standards Bureau informed me on several occasions that there has been a policy violation of the detective not documenting the fraud reports that I have in their police report or the affidavits I have of the doctors. In the past, Internal Affairs and demanded for me to submit those reports, and I did. Nothing was done or documented. And for some reason, this Internal Affairs detective acknowledges that there was a policy violation, but was instructed by Captain Mesmar not to do anything about it. I confronted the captain about it, and he has nothing to say. There are 2 police reports. One was for regular fraud, and the other was battery and attempted murder and the like. The detectives for the fraud refused to document various expert affidavits that I have, nor the fact that the Attorney General contacted him, yet instead it's 50 pages of misrepresenting the facts, the evidence, slandering my name and talking bad about me to the Attorney General. The statute of limitations for regular fraud is ran because the detective did not apply to Florida delayed discovery rules, despite Internal Affairs acknowledging such, and failed to take action or document appropriately. However, there is a potential offense of insurance and Medicaid fraud. The regional chief of the Medicaid fraud unit informed me she has attempted to contact the detective superior because she believes the Tampa Police has jurisdiction and capability to address this, and has offered assistance on numerous occasions. On the other ongoing issues is that in 2020, I was illegally threatened by the Tampa Police for attempting to file. I got just these 2 pages, and I'm running out of time. Can I conclude, please?
If you will, please draw to a conclusion.
Okay.
If you have anything new to share with us, we are all a little familiar with the case.
Okay. Well, I mean, all of this just occurred for the past few weeks, but the detective superior allowed me to file such report after fighting with the Tampa Police, and we got an argument a week later. Said he didn't want to help. Recently, I spoke to him and addressed this with him, stating there was no formal investigation of the battery, attempted murder, and such. And I have evidence that is not on the reports, and I would like to file additional charges on behalf of my child, because assault on a mother is assault on a fetus. under Florida Statute 782.09 and 775.025. He informed me that he's a fraud detective and a different unit reviews those matters and told me to come in person with my evidence and speak to a detective in that unit. I have not done so because I fear for my safety and the conduct of these cops. I'd like to formally address that Captain Mesmore's previous statements about my case and the evidence on the CRB is completely fraudulent and misrepresentation of the facts and the evidence, and I'm going to demand that this behavior is to cease and desist. There are new concerns, ongoing concerns, and new evidence that was either not submitted to the Tampa Police or was initially refused to be accepted and documented accordingly because Captain Mesmore inappropriately told the whole department not to accept the evidence I have, or because the detective and Tampa Police negligently disregarded the affidavits that I have. None of these reports I have in my hand are documented in the police report. There is no review and no notations from any detectives. These are affidavits, reports from fraud experts and doctors. The reports allege that the nurse forged my consent forms to a procedure that was forced upon me, and reports showing that I was assaulted and overdosed with the anesthesia. The FDA and reports show that the standard dosage of ropivacaine is 5 millimeters because anything over that is known to cause toxicity, and this is a medically known fact. I was given 20 millimeters. I'm not going to tolerate a white man dictating my life, my decisions, and cause irreparable harm to my claim and my due process of justice. I certainly will not tolerate racism from the Tampa Police or a white doctor getting away with committing a crime against a minority. In between 2019 and the last time I was here was last time was July 27th, 2021. The fraud report came out July 27th of 2021. September 2021, I was allowed to file additional charges of battery and attempted murder. December 2021, I obtained an affidavit from a doctor, and all throughout 2022, I have additional reports, evidence, and depositions that came about.
Thank you, Sandra.
I'm going to give you this. None of this is on the police report. Okay? You guys are really neglecting my rights here. Can I even?
I will now ask whether there were any recorded comments received through the voicemail of 813-274-7340 for this meeting.
There were no recorded comments.
I will now ask if the clerk received any written comments for this meeting by sending a written comment either online or by mail.
Sorry, one more person for public comment.
Public comment portion is now concluded.
This is the person.
If you will.
Madam Clerk, can you finish the statement about any recorded, answer that question, please?
There were no recorded comments, nor were there any written comments.
Okay, thank you.
But, Mr. Chair, Maria Pettis-Mackel from the legal department. Since one other individual came in, can we allow her to just provide that public comment?
And it wasn't announced, that public comment.
Yes, if you will, please approach the podium. Please state your name and address for the record, and please limit your commentary to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kelsey Stremski. I live on 635 Windrush Bay Drive, Tarpon Springs, Florida, 34689. I was assaulted on October 12th, 2019 by the City of Tampa police officers Nicholas J. Hardesty and Edward S. Barretto. This took place at St. Joseph Bay Care Hospital in Tampa. I would like this matter involving the City of Tampa Police to be investigated by the Citizens Review Board for excessive use of force and for violations of Professional Code of Misconduct provided in 11B 270011.
If you will continue.
I have statements that I have written out. It's quite lengthy. If you guys have any more questions, but I would feel probably most comfortable if you guys read the statement that I wrote for you today.
Under item 7, the board will have the opportunity to address the commentary they heard today. And if they wish to ask any additional questions at that time, they have the time to do so.
Thank you.
If you will, you can leave whatever material you have, copies with the clerk to ensure that we're able to review it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That would conclude public comment portion of this particular meeting. We will now continue with item 7. At this time, the floor is open for board members to respond to the public comment received tonight. If you will, Ms. Guy.
Sure, thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here tonight. It's good that we have folks that come to these meetings and think that we're going to listen to them when we do. What I would like to say is that I would request that Captain Mesmer bring this case to us and bring it forward to us if it is a closed investigation. We don't know that, right?
We do not know.
We
that at this
do
moment.
not know that
It's a
it is
case.
closed or not? Pardon? I'm asking our counselors.
And that would be case number 2020CF000291 is the case
Yeah.
that the commentary wishes to review.
With regards to that case, Mike Schmid, on behalf of the legal department, there has not been a investigation filed. There hasn't been anything. As far as we look, there hasn't been anything that we're aware of.
Well, then can we ask, can I ask, and the rest of the board has, you know.
Sure,
of course, there- I would like to ask that the case be brought to Captain Mesmer, and if it is something that needs to go to internal affairs, it should.
Understood.
Okay.
Question
And-
is,
but-
is this case
I
a
don't
complaint
What
case
is it?
or is it an incident number case? What type of case is the numeric that we received
Good
tonight, the
question.
2020CF000291? Well, what's the title of that case?
It's a criminal
Criminals?
case. It's a criminal
It is a
case.
criminal case.
Kamaria Pettis-Mackle from the City Attorney's Office. Mr. Chair, if I may, and Ms. Guy, I understand what you're asking. If you can make that in the form of a motion for the board to be able to vote on that. And as this board works under ordinance 18-8, the provisions of subsection 6 allow the board to review of matters of importance or interest. I understand that this board or, Mr. Schmidt has provided information that there is no pending investigation regarding the officers, but the board is allowed under the ordinance to hear matters of importance or interest. But if, Ms. Guy, if you could just make that in the form of a motion, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, I will. So in the form of a motion, I would like,
Will you do the motion after we have some other discussion? Because I agree with your motion. I just got something.
well, I have a couple of other
Well,
things to say
yeah.
too, so.
Okay,
If
so
we do all the motions
if
at
you
the
will,
end.
Ms. Guy,
Because I-
continue, and if you
Okay.
wish to place your motion on the floor, we'll hold our vote and discussion until all members of the panel have the opportunity to speak.
Okay, and this is just Irene Guy, my personal feeling, when you come to the podium and you talk about us as a board not being transparent, if we don't do something about this, it's a lack of commitment. I'm sorry, my counselor is looking at me.
No, you're absolutely fine.
That's just my personal feeling is you get a lot more flies with sugar. And to say that the board will lack commitment if we don't do something about that, that's offensive to me. But then I will make the motion because I feel that we should bring this forward. But the other thing I want to say is this is the Citizens Review Board, not the Citizens Investigation Board. We review cases that have been investigated by the Tampa Police Department. So I just want to be clear on that. I'm done.
Do you wish to continue with your motion?
I would, but Ms.,
Yeah.
would you like
If
to
you
say
could.
something before I do my
If
motion?
there's anyone else, because I had something I wanted to
All
say,
right,
but
go
kind of coincide with her motion,
Yeah.
and we could do one motion. Anyone else?
I would ask, Ms. Storimski? Yes. I apologize if I mispronounced, is it Storimski?
You said it correctly, yes.
Ms. Storimski, did you file a complaint with the Tampa Police Department?
I tried several times, yes.
If you will.
It is on record.
Can you come to
Oh,
the,
sorry.
these are public hearings that are recorded.
Sorry. Yes, I attempted twice to make a complaint. I actually reached out to Megan Newcomb actually recently, and I made a complaint in 2021 about my situation.
Okay, now, Ms. Storimski, this happened on the 12th of October of 19?
Yes.
And the complaint was filed when?
In 2021, due to COVID, there was a lot of dispositions for my case. It took a very long time, and my lawyer advised me that it would seem like retaliation if I tried to do a complaint while the case was still active and ongoing.
Now, when you say case active and ongoing, what particular case are we talking about?
I was charged with the battery against a law
The
enforcement
case against
officer.
you?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Not convicted.
And Ms. Storimski, what were you charged with
Battery against a law enforcement officer.
from this incident on October 12th?
Yes. But they didn't arrest me until January of 2020.
So they arrested you a couple of months after the incident?
Yes, even though I had seen that they had pushed the charges that Monday after the event, they waited to do a warrant until January.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will you stay at the mic?
You will. Dr. Collins?
I was gonna
And
ask you if
and
you would
will,
stay at the mic.
If you could continue to
That's-
stay at the podium, there's additional commentary and possible questions.
Okay.
My question is, you didn't file per se with us, you waited to file with the police department, but we have like a citizen review pamphlet that we've had out there, and we've asked people, when you have a problem, go to one of the districts or wherever, and just file that, because once you go through the police process, as was so stated, they have to investigate it. We cannot look at the case until after the investigation. Once the investigation is complete, then we have an opportunity, and once you file a citizen review report, we additionally can say, when you come down and file with us, that when we ask and make this vote, then once the investigation is completed, it come back to us. And to show the due diligence of the board, what we also have done has indicated that anyone who files a complaint and come with the board, when they get the findings and it's ready for discussion, you are to be notified, just as the board's to be notified, so you will know that your findings is coming back before this board. Did you do any of that, or was that also put on the side because?
They told me that it was a closed complaint already at the TPA, and then I reached out to the city council email to express that I wanted this to be investigated, and then I was given the email of Megan Newcomb, who works as a lawyer for the Tampa Police Department. And that I did that about a month ago, and I don't know what the process is, but that was the way of me trying to get you guys involved, and now I'm here with the coalition to speak on my behalf about it.
Okay. I do need that, and I'm gonna be ready for your motion, but I wanna ask one more question. And if I'm inappropriate in asking this question, let me know. Most of the speakers came from the Tampa Bay Community Action Committee.
Yes.
I'm trying to find out, what is the Tampa Bay Community Action Committee? They know what the CRB is. Is it okay for us to ask what the Tampa Bay Community Action Committee is? And I'm asking you that because when you guys start speaking, I thought you were with the Community Action Agency, which is also a Community Action Committee that's in Florida, that's under the county and under the state and under federal government. And so when you said that, I kind of heard the Tampa Bay, and it encompasses Tampa Bay. It is not Tampa Bay. Can I find out what this committee is so we'll know who is making these recommendations before this board?
I'm actually not a member. I'm here.
No, not you. I was asking the committee members if they could tell us, it's just a nonprofit. It's just, and if that's inappropriate for me to ask, I'll pull it back. But I want to know who the committee is that, almost the same.
Yes.
If you will, state your name for the record.
Taylor Cook. We are a group that started back in 2020 with the George Floyd Rebellion here in Tampa. Our main focus right now is doing independent counsel, but we also are a grassroots organization as well. We are not a nonprofit. And we, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but we work with impacted families. We worked close with the Andrew Joseph III's family, Josiah Penner's family, Jonas Joseph's family. So that's why sometimes we talk about those cases. And then also we want independent counsel for the CRB. We fight for greater police accountability in Tampa, with our end goal being community controlled the police, which is where there would be a board like this, but it would be all Tampa citizens and directly elected by the public and would have a little bit more power.
And are you familiar with this process that we have?
No, I was not the one talking with Kelsey, but I know that Laura was looking very hard on how to file a complaint and couldn't, figure it. The information was not easily accessible. So that's why we just decided as a group to come here tonight and speak to you all.
This is old, it's not new, but I want to give, I don't know if we've done an updated one yet, but I'd like to make sure that you get this information, because almost literally from the inception, we came up with a process on how community people could file complaints. And those individuals that I just heard you mention, names of people from the Andrew Joseph on down to assisting, I would say it would be great to make sure that you know the process so that you can have those people to come in and file their concerns here. Then we will tell them for you. And we're not in any way adverse to any community organizations, but I think it's really important that when you approach an organization, know what they can and can't do, know who they are, but more importantly, how you file, because on the back of here, it clearly says contact numbers to file a complaint. And it's in District 1, 2, and 3.
We've never seen that. We've never seen that pamphlet. So I would say it just needs to be a little bit more accessible to the public, because we also have full-time jobs. So trying to do the research when we get home from work, we couldn't find that information.
And I think we have a website where our name's on them, and we'll spread it out and contact us, because what we're saying is we are pleased when community individuals come in and address the concerns, but we want to make sure that they also know how to reach us and what we are doing, because we too are citizens that are volunteers and that are working hard and committed to making sure, and we want to make sure that people clearly understand. And I think that's some of what's happening. Some things has happened, people have come out, but however long we've been here, folks did not have any idea. I know I'm on my second term, and the term is a long time. These things were out from the beginning and from the onset, and we would like to make sure that when you do your due diligence and work with people in the community, make sure that you know to tell them how they can come before this board.
Okay, just one more. Any other board members wish, if you will, Carlos Valdez?
I appreciate you all coming tonight and speaking on the issue and the matter. It speaks to what we do. We don't just review cases. We also look at matters of importance of the community, and we saw that here tonight. And while yes, we have a process to file complaints at district office or whatnot, this is a platform where that can be done. So I appreciate you guys coming out here and advising us, of the matter. I also would like to see how we can work with the district and have either more publicity as to how complaints can be filed, because it's really unknown. There's no really a way of knowing how to file those complaints for these cases to come in front of us. So I'd like to see if we can either create a poster or some type of literature that we can present to the community so that there's more access to ways of, hearing cases of this nature.
Thank you, Valdez.
And let me just close my mic.
Carolyn Collins.
Did you indicate that you had been on the website and you didn't see anything?
I was not the one doing the research. Oh,
Can
here's
I answer
Laura.
this question? Hi, Laura Rodriguez from Tampa Bay Community Action Committee.
If you will, state your name.
Laura Rodriguez from Tampa Bay Community Action Committee. Been on the website a lot of times. I've tried to look for information directly on the website. From what I've seen, there's not a button that says apply or file a complaint. It says you can do that, but I've looked thoroughly on the website a couple times. I even know who was in the seat previous to each person. That's information that I can access, but accessing the actual complaint file or a direct email is something that is aloof on our, not really on the website. As well as I don't know if you guys have direct emails, but that's also not on the website because I've tried to look multiple times just in case it didn't work out. But yeah, I've thought about contacting y'all directly to ask you to ask very forward questions about how to file, but not having any contact information and just knowing your name, I didn't feel super comfortable reaching out on Facebook or something like that. And I thought an actual email would be, an email for the future would be helpful.
In reference to the website you're referring to, which website is that?
It is, when I Google Tampa Citizens Review Board, it is the Citizens Review Board. On that website, you can also access the municipal codes, and through it, I can see multiple things of that sort. But yes.
Tampa Police Department
Well, Ms.
has.
Scott.
I actually want to.
Let me just.
Just one moment, if you will,
The
Ms. Scott.
Tampa Police Department has a web page. And on that page, I do believe, and I tried to pull it up just now, the complaint should really go through the Tampa Police Department. The avenue we take is we take your information and we refer it back to the police department because we don't investigate the case. We hand it back to the police department with, in some cases, if we have reviewed a case, we do go back with questions on that case. And those questions go back to the police department to be answered. But the initial step should be that the complaint goes through the police department. Now, if that's already been done, that's the reason I'm going to make this motion, to have this case pulled up by Captain Mesmer, have him look at the case and see where it is so he can come back to us and let us know this. Because really, we can't do anything until we have Captain Mesmer look at that case and give us that information. Would that be wrong? I mean, that's how I see it.
This is essentially why I'm here today, because I have gone through every single avenue desperately trying to ask them to reinvestigate my case, and I feel like I was not appropriate. The situation was not appropriately investigated. I do not feel like it was treated appropriately. I don't think there was the right type of accountability. And I had even reached out to the city council email, and I was referred again to Megan Newcomb, who again works for the City of Tampa Police, and I feel like there has just been a huge mishandling and lack of accountability for what has been happening and what happened to me.
Well, with our motion, we will have Captain Mesmer pull your case up and look at it and come back to us and tell us what he sees. And that way, you're coming here tonight, all of you came here tonight to do this, and I think it's the right thing that we should do is to go back and ask Captain Mesmer to pull this case up and look at it and come back to us and give us an explanation as to what is going on. And if it needs to be referred to Internal Affairs or whoever it needs to be referred to. So we've heard you, your voice is heard, and this is the action, I believe, and I'll leave it to the rest of my fellow board members, I believe this is probably our best course of action.
Thank you, Ms. Guy. If you will, Ms. Collins.
I'm going to say still, I don't know how, but before I leave, I'll leave this. It's an old one, but I guess the numbers are still corrected if there's a new one. But we do have an attorney that works with us. I get calls all the time where people are trying to reach us and they ask for permission, whether it's the media or someone else, and we talk to them. I'm on the website right now. I do not see it. And so we will ask that, and that's why I said wait when you do the motion. I agree with your motion, but I think we need to also, I see citizen review over to the side, but I see filing complaint, and I'm trying to click on it and it's not going anywhere. But I'm going to refrain and second the motion, but I think we need to make sure that we know how citizens who are trying to get information, if they could get to the attorney that worked primarily with us. I'm looking at citizen review and I'm seeing everything. that's
If you will, Ms.
TPD.
Guy, I'm sorry.
I think
Oh,
there's
yeah, all right.
probably,
I'm upset.
that would be a second second motion.
Want to make it a second? Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I mean, it really isn't germane to this motion.
Go ahead.
So,
Any, I'm sorry.
no, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
Any other board members wish to address the commentary, participants that we received tonight? If you will, Ms. Guy, if you want to continue with your motion, the floor is open.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to move, as a matter of importance to the community, that we ask Captain Mesmer to pull case 2020 CF 00291 and return, don't know exactly how I want to say it, and provide information to the Citizens Review Board as to the
Bring a report back to us.
yeah, well, I guess bring the report back to us and let us know if it has either gone to or he intends to put it through Internal Affairs.
Second motion.
Ms. Irene Guy has placed a motion on the floor in reference to, in the matter of importance to the community, asking Captain Mesmer to pull case 2020-000-291 for investigation or review, and in this disposition of findings will be presented back to the Citizen Review Board. Dr. Carolyn
Very good.
Collins.
Just a correction on that, that's 2020 CF
Yeah,
dash 00291.
Correction on the case, 2020 CF 000-291. Dr. Carolyn Collins has seconded the motion. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? And before we continue with the vote, if you will, Mr. Schmidt?
Chair, just as a matter of clarification of that as well, the 20 CF number was the felony case number that was related to her case. The actual TPD case number is 19-531689. And in another clarification, I think I stated earlier that there wasn't a investigation open, and to clarify that a little bit more, what I was talking about is with professional standards. As she stated, she did make a complaint, is my understanding, out to one of the districts. It was looked into and it was closed. That's all we know at this point from here.
If you will, Carolyn Collins?
Yeah, Attorney Smith, is it possible when this motion should it pass, that whatever process to make sure that it's filed with the Citizen Review Board process to go through IA investigation? And can we make sure that whatever we do for that process, that she filed that so it'll be officially filed by her, and then we pursue that? That was kind of sort of like, because that way we're consistent with our process. Because what you're saying now, and what she says, she's never really filed with us. So we're asking her to file, but we're also asking them in your motion to do an investigation and bring it back to
Well,
us.
let me ask you, citizens don't file with us, correct?
They
do not.
They
do
file
not.
with TPD through a process, and when they come and complain here, then we want that process back to us.
Correct,
Right.
okay.
It
was
filed with the TPD, the complaint.
I would like to amend my motion to correct the case number to 19-531689.
Note that the motion on the floor has been amended to include case number 19-531689. We will now continue with the vote in reference to the amended motion that's on the floor. All those in favor, please show by raise of hand. Any opposed, please show by raise of hand. That motion passes. Thank you. Is there reason for a second motion or any continuous dialogue, if you will?
It doesn't have to
Charlotte
be a
Collins.
motion, it could be continuous dialogue. I was able to pull up the website. I went on the website, I see Citizen Review Board, I came into it, I see the agenda. I know we are on TPD's website, and I know that we're the City of Tampa with TPD and the city's Citizen Review Board. I'm gonna ask next month, if at all possible, I don't think I need a motion, to bring some kind of report back to us so that we will be able to say to the citizens in the community how clear it is that they can reach the Citizen Review Board process. I'm on the site now, and I don't see how to file that complaint. I don't understand it. And when I look at it, I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you, it looked like the Citizen Review Board are the policemen, because when I come up with our agenda, and we recognize we're on TPD's website, all I'm seeing here is all police owns all the sites. And I think that there need to be, I'm gonna call it user-friendly, best practices, or whatever else, if we have to look to try to figure out how we can make this be user-friendly for the community. I'm not gonna make a motion, I just want, if you can come back, Attorney, and let us know what it is.
Kamaria Pettis-Mackle from the City Attorney's Office. So underneath on the website, underneath there's a tab for the agendas. There's also a tab or the information regarding public comment that provides the phone number and an email address in order for there to be public comment. So that's already available to the public. That's on the same link for the CRB, for the minutes, for the agendas, and for even the annual report is also there. So that information is already there and how to participate for a public meeting, but that's already there.
Yeah, and that's on here, and it looks good. I can click right in. But if we're telling people if they have a problem, and we've had people come before us that have problems in the city, and we say, well, why don't you come see what we do here and lodge your complaint? And we've sent them out to District 1, 2, or 3 for TPD to file their complaint. I couldn't tell them, and I'm gonna be the first one to tell y'all, I'm not computer savvy. I just know how to use it. I couldn't tell them that they could go on here under Citizen Review where it says agenda minutes and annual report. Only I could say to them is you'll see filing, but when I come up there, I don't see anything.
In reference to item 10 on the agenda, and if I understand you correctly, you may need to state it within a motion for a presentation to be given in reference to the active site, how to access it, what material is on there to ensure that the community at large is aware of it and know how to access it and know how to utilize it in their best interest. So that may be something that could be discussed under item 10, under CRB staff reports and business, if you'd like for such a presentation to be given to our viewers at home here at the Citizen Review Board meeting.
That'd be great. We can move on to that.
Are we gonna make the motion now? Or
Call for the motion. I can make it. Did your motion pass?
No,
Yes.
Okay. If that motion is passed, if it's okay to do it while we're under the same subject, we could do it now. Be
If you
completed
wish
with
to,
it?
yes, if you wish.
I'd like to make a motion that we get a report from the attorney and the TPD on the website and how user-friendly it is for the community and the public to be able to access not just the minutes and the report and the public meeting, but if they have a complaint, how to file it.
There's a motion on the floor.
Second.
Would that include, sorry,
If you will, Mr.
would that
Valdez.
include also, I heard you say how to file a complaint, but I also want to know more so at the district office, what material and what's the process of somebody coming out of the streets to file that complaint, what that looks like. So if that can also be included in the presentation for our pleasure.
I said file a complaint, so whatever they want to bring back to us, and then we can make recommendations.
Perfect.
But once we see it, then we can make recommendations based. So filing complaint was included with the things that I see on.
And also how we can access those flyers, because I've never gotten flyers.
They haven't updated.
But send that to him so he can see what
So there's a motion on the floor presented by Carolyn Collins in reference to Tampa Police Department returning to CRB with a presentation or tutorial on the tab of CRB on the Tampa Gov site or the TPD site to share with our viewers at home how to access it and what attributes that site would give to them. That motion has been seconded by Irene Guy. Are we prepared to vote? All those in favor of the motion on the floor, please show by raise of hand. Any opposed? The motion passes. That will conclude item 7, staff and board response to public comment. We will continue with the agenda under item 8, items to be reviewed. Tonight, we are reviewing case 20F-152. An officer was alleged to be conducting non-law enforcement extra duty at a club in Ybor City without authorization. MOR 1005, standard of conduct not sustained. MOR 1001, non-leo extra duty work not sustained. MOR 1807, failure to comply with department policies not sustained. And we can have a member of the Tampa Police Department to present this case. Approach the podium. Please state your name, rank in the department you represent.
Good evening, Captain Patrick Messmer, Professional Standards Bureau. So you all have read the report here. Quite a bit of information here. The gist of this was in 2020, one of our officers was reported to potentially be working at a club in Ybor City. There was an investigation conducted as to that allegation. There was a flyer that was circulating that had her photograph identifying her as a hostess at a club. Numerous interviews were conducted. There was some discussion that the officer did appear.
Sorry to interrupt. However, for the participant that's in the audience, I asked if you can you not show your verbiage sign as Captain Messmer is giving this case, please, or throughout the duration of this meeting. Thank you.
I'm sorry, so the allegations were standard of conduct, non-law enforcement extra duty work, failure to comply with various counts of the City of Tampa Ethics Code that involve outside employment. And as a result of the investigation, there was not enough evidence to sustain the violations. So all of those violations were not sustained. So again, a not sustained is not a exoneration. That doesn't mean the evidence showed that it did not occur. And sustained means the evidence showed that it did occur. So this was one of those situations where the evidence was not conclusive to prove the allegations by a preponderance of the evidence.
Thank you, Captain Messmer. If you will, Mr. Tamayo.
Captain, this officer, was her beat or her zone Ybor City?
At the time it was.
Okay. And this Tangra nightclub is in Ybor City?
Correct.
Okay. Is this the subject pamphlet that we're talking about?
Yes.
And can you show that pamphlet on the screen?
I don't have the pamphlet with me. I mean, I can put it on the screen if you'd like for me to, if you'd like to hand it to the clerk.
And the likeness on that pamphlet is a photograph that Officer Herrera Enriquez gave to the ownership of the Tangra nightclub.
I believe it was a
for the purpose
promoter.
of promoting the Tangra nightclub.
Correct.
And again, this is a nightclub that is within the zone that Officer Herrera Enriquez's unit covers.
Correct.
Okay. Is this the kind of public display or clothing that we would expect a Tampa police officer to make public?
Definitely not if she identified herself as a Tampa police officer.
Well, but again, I wanted to set the context that this is an officer who works within that district, and she's giving a promotional picture to that club to promote around that district in which that officer is serving.
Correct.
Okay? And the officer, I think I remember reading that the officer indicated that she knew she was giving that picture to the club ownership as a way of promoting this club.
Correct.
Okay. Now, I'm just going to read the standard of conduct, 1005. Since the conduct of department employees on or off duty, and it's already been established that Officer Herrera Enriquez was off duty, on or off duty directly reflects upon the department and the city. Employees shall at all times conduct themselves in a manner which does not compromise their professionalism. And again, this is within the zone that Officer Herrera has a beat on. Ethics and objectives as police officers, or the professionalism, ethics, and objectives of the department or the city, or impairs their ability to perform as a police officer within the city. Now, I'm not asking you a question, Captain Messmer. I'm just indicating that that providing this kind of material, knowing that it's going to be dispersed to the public, does not meet the standard of conduct that we have within 1005. You don't need to respond to that. I'm making my own comment on that.
If you will, Colonel Reyes.
Yes. Good evening, Captain Mesmer. I want to follow up with a comment and a question. Following up on Mr. Tamayo's comment. So when I look at 1005, the standard of conduct, to me, that's a catch-all phrase. And again, hearkening back, my analogy to the military, it's kind of like the conduct unbecoming of an officer. It's a catch-all. And so for all those reasons, I support my brethren, committee members' comments when he made his comments on the standard of conduct. So that's the comment. The question I have is, and it goes back to a statement made by, where was it? Corporal Pierre. It was a statement by Corporal Pierre when he was being questioned, or she was being questioned. The quote was, "This is a training issue." So it's referring to what's really the problem here. Was this a violation of a policy, or was this really a training issue of a 2-year experienced officer? In the statements as well from the subject, she acknowledged she made a mistake, and basically she had a lack of sound judgment on that. So I guess I'm a little bit concerned about this, because when I was reading through all the statements, and correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't see any indications of what the retraining was. Because since there's no violation, but yet there's an admission by the corporal in the statement that this is a training issue, then I think that begs the question, okay, so what was the retraining? What was the corrective training that was done? Because there was clearly no discipline that was imposed. And so that's my question to you, if you know.
Well, I think the issue is going back to the standard of conduct. Now, you can sit down and have a discussion with somebody about why this is a bad idea. In this particular case, this was run by legal as well. Officers don't give up all of their rights when they become a police officer, and if they're not identifying themselves as Tampa police officers, if they're not using the position as a police officer, if they're not doing something that is borderline illegal or unethical or immoral, then it is not a standard of conduct violation. So we could not order her not to do this again. That was the result of the discussions that we had. We could explain to her why we don't think it's a good idea for her to be in putting this sort of image out there to the public because she is a Tampa police officer. But based upon the content and what happened, this isn't any, she's not promoting, any sort of a house of prostitution or any sort of activity that's against the law, and she's not being compensated for it. There was no evidence that the investigation uncovered that she was being compensated for it. So while all of us would agree that this is not a good idea for one of our officers to engage in, all we can do is tell her that and suggest that she not do this in the future. But if she was adamant about continuing to do this in the future, I don't know that there was anything legally the department could do, because then she could have a potential lawsuit against the department for abridging her rights as a private citizen.
So if I could just follow up on that with a comment to that, Captain Mesmer. And I think I agree with you, but I think that's what's the little bit that's gnawing in the back of my cranial housing unit right now, thinking about this case, because it's all about the little things. It's all about the little details. It's a lot about the little gray areas that, quite honestly, we hold, at least, and I'll speak for myself, I view the police and hold them to a higher standard of conduct, because they're going to be placed, and they're constantly placed, in gray area type of situations, ethical type of situations that are not black and white. But we hold them to that standard because they're the ones that are administering the law. They're the ones that are weighing things out on the street to make sure that we have law and order. So we look to them for that sound judgment. And so when it comes to something as perhaps arguably as insignificant as this, like what's the big deal? To me, it is a big deal. Because if you're starting to slide or question or walk the margins on something as insignificant as this, then I would be concerned looking at police officers when the bigger issues, the more nebulous gray issues happen. And I think that's the reason why we have 1005. That's why I think that's the catch-all phrase. That's the conduct unbecoming. That's what that is. And so it's just a comment of mine, and I wanted to express that because when I read this case, I read it like 3 or 4 times to really try to understand what was going on here. And I think it's beyond, was a policy being violated? I think this gets to the very ethos, to the very fiber of our law enforcement and our community, and the relationship between our law enforcement and our community, and the confidence that we have in our law enforcement. And so this is why this is a very, very important case, and that is why we have 1005. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Reyes. Any additional questions or statements? If you will, Devon Agandela.
I think you mentioned it earlier. I think the only issue that I see is that it's happening in the same district that she polices. You know, if it was New Tampa or Carrollwood or South Tampa, I don't think it would be as big an issue, at least for me. But I think having your face on the, the window of the club, and then also being expected to police that same street, I think that's a hard ask of an officer to do both things or do them well. So.
Sure, and I'll just respond to that too. It did indicate in the investigation that when her supervisor found out about that, she was moved to a different part of the area, and additionally, it was because she actually knew this promoter for quite some time, well before she even joined the police department. So I don't know if it was specifically coincidental that it happened to be at the place where she was, on patrol, but it was because she had an existing personal relationship with that promoter well before she ever joined the department.
Thank you.
My question comes from an area of safety, of public safety, and also officer safety. Knowing the physical demand and dangerous role an officer is involved, do we monitor extra hours performed outside of their scheduled duty? Is there a cap on how many hours they can work outside of their scheduled duty to ensure during their scheduled week there's no fatigue, there's no additional stress, and that officer is getting the proper rest in between shifts.
So there's two things there. Number one, if it is extra duty work that is done through the department, we do have specific limits and policy for the number of hours of off-duty work somebody can work in a week. I believe right now it's 26 hours. In addition to your 40 hours, you can work an additional 26 hours of extra duty. If it is a non-law enforcement occupation, like you're a realtor or something on the side, you have to fill a specific form out and have a meeting, usually with the assistant city attorney and with one of the chiefs, about that specific job. And those questions are asked: how much work is this going to be on your days off? How much time are you going to be devoting to that? And those secondary employment opportunities have to be approved by the department. So the department has to review that, determine, number one, that there's no conflict of interest, and then determine, number two, that it's not going to adversely impact job performance.
Thank you. Any other questions for Captain Messmer?
If you continue with the extra duty hours, I did not have the opportunity to do the thorough read on this, so I don't have that many questions. I'm just going to agree with other board members and things that they cited. I kind of started backwards this time and kind of browsed over all of the interviews, but one of the ones I got to was the disposition first. And the first question came up to me is, who filed this complaint? And I still want to ask that question because it wasn't clear. But who filed the complaint? Because there was a lot of work, interviews, et cetera, that went into this, and then everything was, as you indicated, not that it wasn't wrong, but it was not sustained, even down to, and I looked at two of them because I thought I saw something in there where she did give this person a picture to do the promotion, something about I was dancing for them, things of that nature. So hearing that she was moved, but I'm more concerned about the standard of conduct, and I'm also concerned about it with standard of conduct, and if she didn't violate anything that's ethical in the department, who filed this complaint that that individual thought it was something wrong that they filed it? And was she really not working at all in any capacity?
So initially, the complaint was made by another officer. Another officer told a supervisor that she was actually employed by and was working for the club. Now, had that been true, that would have been very serious. There's actually a state statute that would prevent her from working at an establishment that serves alcohol, in addition to the city ordinance, or excuse me, the ethics code, which requires secondary employment to be disclosed, and it wasn't. So it was an internal complaint. An officer reported to a supervisor, and then it became an internal affairs investigation just because of the nature of the complaint, and if it was going to require a lot of interviews and a lot of work to get done. So that would be a complaint that internal affairs would handle, not necessarily at the supervisory level. So it wasn't until all those interviews were conducted that it was established that she wasn't actually engaged in employment at the time.
Might I ask that as you looked at this case and we pulled it, is there a possibility down the road that this case could lead to a policy change? Not so much of what they're doing, since people can do so many different extra jobs, but one that anything that's like this, promotional, it may not be a job for her, but it's promotional. Somebody makes something, offer promotion, that if you're going to be doing things like that, handing out your pictures or other items, that maybe they should have some kind of reporting form where these things are being reported.
Yeah, it definitely is required if they're going to use their position associated with it. I haven't heard, and this was a 2020 case, I haven't heard of any prospective policy change as a result of this.
And that's policy changes within TPD. Because you already have the state that's backing you up with the state's regulations, but no policy change just to make sure that the time you guys put in this investigation where even another officer thought she was working and it was a violation, some kind of policy change that if you're going to do something like this, that you at least have some kind of reporting format.
Yeah, and I don't know the specific conversations that happened with legal counsel at the time, but like I mentioned, we have to be very careful of abridging an officer's rights as a private citizen when they do something that is completely unrelated to the police department. So I would need that brought back to legal to see whether or not there would even be an opportunity there. Because we can call a lot of things a violation of standard of conduct, but if somebody's engaged in activity that is protected under the First Amendment, then we can't just say that's standard of conduct. If one of our officers decides they want to participate in a protest, we can't say that they're violating standard of conduct because they're protesting something that is, anti-police. We've had officers participate in protests in 2020 while they were off duty. We can't, there were definitely some people who would like them charged with standard of conduct for that, but they're engaged in protected activities. They're, exercising their rights as a private citizen at that point, and they're not in any way, shape, or form involving the department. So I don't know, if we could really have a policy that would say anytime you, post your picture in public, you have to notify the department of it.
I think it's more the
If you will,
I think it's
continue.
more the content. Like,
Carlos
you look
Valdez.
at this, it's not the same as me posting on a flyer, hey, I'm gonna have my, I'm not 50, but my 35th birthday party, whatever that looks like. But to see something of this magnitude, it represents a department, and it's something that it speaks to the branding of the department. So while, yeah, an officer may be protesting peacefully, but if they're protesting not peacefully, then that's the route where, officers will, and other individuals would like for those individuals to be, upheld to the law. But definitely, I would agree with my colleagues here that the standard of conduct as it relates to MOR 1005, speaks to this content. I mean, it's not something that the department should be proud of in terms of representation.
Thank you, Carlos Valdez. If you will, Colonel Reyes.
Captain Mesmer, let me ask you this question. Okay, so we'll stipulate that two of the 1807 and 1011, I believe it was, they were not sustained. So assuming that's true, okay, in your mind, from your experience, what would then constitute a violation of 1005 in this case? What circumstances or facts would have had to happen for that decision to have been flipped over, and they would have then said, wait a minute, standard of conduct, was violated? Is there any situation you could think of?
And you've seen this in previous cases too. Had we sustained some of the other violations, standard of conduct would have been sustained as well, especially the ethics code. Or if you're violating the ethics code, you're clearly compromising the ethics and objectives of the department. So that would be a default standard of conduct violation. If she was doing something in violation of Florida law, that would also be a standard of conduct violation as well. So I don't see, I just don't see how standard of conduct would be sustained on its own, given the nature of the fact that she did not. Now, if she was in her TPD uniform and cut part of it out, I would say definitely you would have a standard of conduct violation then. But unless she had, Officer Vanya TPD, that would have been a standard of conduct violation. But something that, nobody, unless you knew her, unless this was an internal complaint, I'm sure nobody, well, I know nobody from the community made this complaint, so I don't know if anybody knew that this woman was a TPD officer other than the person who made the complaint. So that's the big thing, is if we don't know by looking at it that she's a TPD officer and that she's representing the department, it's not a standard of conduct violation in and of itself.
But very respectfully, that's where I take issue with it, because it's not about what other people know or don't know. It's her as a police officer. She knows who she is, and she still did that. And in her statement, she admitted, well, that was probably not the smartest thing for me to do. So that's my point.
Correct.
So, thank you.
It was an act, a decision that was, in my view, very unbecoming of a police officer.
With no other statements or concerns, the chair is open to a motion on whether we concur or not concur or are unable to reach determination regarding the disposition of the case and its findings.
Mr. Chair, I'll take a stab at it. And if I'm incorrect, please correct me. I move to non-concur on the disposition of the case regarding MOR 1005, but I concur with the provision, the disposition regarding the other two MORs, 1011 and 1807.
Right, and we actually have two under 1807, under the Ethics Code 2-511 under 1807 and Ethics Code 2-512. But I think you're going in the right direction, Colonel Reyes.
Colonel Reyes, would you like to amend your motion?
What he said.
Included.
It's just restating that, that the Citizens Review Board does not concur with the finding of not sustaining violation of Manual of Regulations 1005, Standard of Conduct, and that the CRB, the Review Board, does concur with the finding of not sustaining violations of Manual of Regulations 1011, Manual of Regulations 1807, under the Ethics Code 2-511, and Manual of Regulations 1807, Tampa Ethics Code 2-512.
Okay, so if you would like to remove your motion.
No, you could, Kamari Pettis-Malcolm from the legal department, you can accept the amendment that he's made.
I accept the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Colonel Reyes has accepted the amended motion made by Lincoln Tamayo. Dr. Carolyn Collins has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we will continue with the vote. All those in favor, please show by raising a hand. Any opposed, please show by raising a hand. That motion passes. Thank you. We will now continue with the agenda under item 9.
Thank you, Captain.
CRB staff reports and business.
I really don't want to see that anymore.
It was up there a bit too long. Was that something you wanted to share with the public, or that was just something for Citizen Review Board?
That was just for us.
Okay. Right, just wanted to ensure.
I don't want to say edification. It was just for us.
We'll continue with the agenda, CRB staff reports and business,
Chair,
if you will. So
Could we-
Ms. Irene Guy.
I would like to move that we move the annual report to our next meeting, because this meeting has gone on very long, and I'd like to be able to talk about the report. But it's your pleasure.
Actually, we're on item 9, Community and Tampa Police Department matters. I apologize. Before we continue with item 10 and take Ms. Guy.
Sorry, I got out of order.
And take Ms. Guy motion in consideration. If you will, if I can focus
Mr. Chair,
everyone to the agenda of Community and Tampa Police Department matters.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
one
sir.
moment. I know
Captain
Mr.
Messer.
Schmidt is looking at the ordinance. I think we might be on a limited time schedule for the annual report. He's reviewing to see if it must be discussed at this meeting. I know we have to present it to City Council within a few months of the beginning of the year.
Let me just go over the provision again of what it says for the CRB annual report. It says, within 30 days of receipt of the annual report, CRB members shall review, if necessary, make corrections.
No later than the second date.
Right. No later than the date of the second CRB meeting, which is tonight, within 30 days of receipt. So you got it in time. You got it within the second meeting. Now you have 30 days from receipt to review it and, if necessary, make any corrections. So that gives you till next month. And then, once that happens, you have 60 days to adopt the annual report. And then it will be presented to the council. So it does appear that you do have 30 days from tonight.
Okay. Before we continue to the possible motion by Ms. Guy to table item 10, including the discussion and review of the 2022 annual report, I'd like to return to item 9, Community and Tampa Police Department matters, if any.
I just have one.
If you will, Dr. Carolyn Collins.
Yes, Mr. President, this is just asking for an update because I keep putting it on my list. Did we get a response from the state attorney? I know you submitted, submitted the letter, but did we ever get a response?
Kamaria Pettis-Mackle from the legal department. No, there's not been a response.
Okay. And just for the record and for the community, we have requested that the state attorney come just to speak to the Citizen Review Board, particularly when it was dealing with what people commonly call riding by the bicycle riding, right? That's not the name of it, when she was going to reactivate it. I don't know what the status is, but we did have a former police chief come in and indicate that they were not going to deal with it, and we wanted to know how the state attorney was going to handle it, and we requested that a letter be sent to her and that she respond, and we still do not have a response. Thank you.
Is it possible to do a follow-up?
Carlos Valdez. Can you elaborate on a follow-up after the sent invitation?
Yeah, so is it possible to reach back out to the office and make communications so that we can see if there's any sense of urgency?
So you're asking me to rescind the letter from the chair, because this is a motion from the board, and I provided the letter from the board.
Was the letter provided in person, via email?
It was, I can't recall, I think, I can't recall how it was sent, but it was sent to the state attorney.
Can there be any form of follow-up?
I could rescind the letter. This is a board action. I did not personally call because this is a board action. I sent the letter to the state attorney's office as it was signed by the chair. If the board makes a motion to rescind that letter, I could certainly do that.
I would like to make that motion to resend the letter, as this board cannot make a follow-up on its own. So via council, we would like for you to make that follow-up for us.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor in reference to the rescinding of the invitation to the state attorney in reference to past discussion and presentation. That motion has been seconded by Dr. Carolyn Collins. Any further discussion upon the motion on the floor? But no further discussion, we'll continue with the vote. All those in favor, please show by raising hand. Any opposed, please show by raising hand. The motion passes. Continuing under item 9 with the Community and Tampa Police Department matters. Captain Messmer, Mike Smith, Kamaria Pettis-Mackle.
I do have a comment.
If you will, Mr. Valdez.
I know the mayor's getting started with their national search of the police chief. I would like to see how the CRB can be involved in that process with the mayor, just like we do with the officers, where we are interviewing them, asking questions. So I would like to see if we can make that recommendation to the mayor. So I would like to make a motion to the mayor for the CRB to be part of that process, whatever that looks like. If she can present to us what her thoughts would be, how we can be part of that process, that's something that I would like to see.
Any further discussion with the motion presented by Carlo Valdez that's on the floor? Is there a second on the?
Let me just say one thing before we vote on this. We're having, I think, difficulties getting people to go do these interviews for the officers. You know, it seems to me that should be the number one focus. If we have said we're going to do this, they're having a problem getting people to do it on this board. So, I mean, I understand that you'd like to be involved, but we need to, it's designed for us to do these interviews for these officers, and there's not enough volunteers to do them right now. So would be my only comment, that we need to focus on things that we are responsible for doing at this point. I'm not opposed to us being involved in finding a new police chief, but that seems a little bit above our pay grade, actually.
I'd like to elaborate. That was one of my comments or statements I was going to make under this particular item is what is the next scheduled TBD hiring interview panel, and do we have an assigned CRB member that stated they be present either in person or by video?
So I did communicate with Ms. Hill. I'm available as of right now to fulfill any other dates that the CRB members can fulfill. I think is part of our duties. We signed up for this as a voluntary basis, so I think we should fulfill all the duties as it relates to our role as a board member of this board. And if that means having to interview law enforcement officers and having to sit through those meetings, yes, they're long days, but it comes with a job that we signed up for. And the chief of police is part of the Tampa Police Department and is a law enforcement officer, so I feel like we should follow the same protocol as we do for the other law enforcement officers.
And just to add notification, there were and are several members of the board that are currently participating, but as Ms. Guy stated, it is a challenge covering each scheduled panel interview. So just let the record show that there are members participating and fulfilling majority of those gaps.
Mr. Chair, was that a rhetorical question you were asking on who's doing the next board?
No, I had concerns to ensure the next schedule, there was no conflict or challenge of any absent member via in person or in video. So I just wanted to concern that that wasn't a challenge.
Okay.
And when was the next scheduled interview panel process?
Yeah, we've all received it, I know that, and I just wanted to share, I believe 2 March is the next one, so that's coming up, and I believe I signed up for that one, and I will be doing it virtually,
Okay.
so.
Hello again, Mike Schmidt. So yes, you should have gotten an email maybe from.
We did.
Yes,
Okay.
And we've signed up.
Okay. And are we good? And then there was another one for March and April dates. Did you get those?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure.
So an email have been sent out for additional ones?
Yes.
Okay, I went, I did it in person.
Mr.
It
Chair.
is a full day, but I would like to indicate that we have been complying. I know that TPD Hiring Division modified the process and indicated that if it was providing a hardship from us in person or virtually, to make sure that we let them know. And I would like to know when we come to the meetings, you know, are all those slots filled? I haven't looked at it again, I haven't seen it, and I've acknowledged that I'm having some problems getting my emails. So I don't mind signing up again. I just need to make sure that I know so I can do it. But I do agree that those are hiring the policemen that we just had a case on that we talked about. I think that if we could do less than that frequency, which is literally every day, if we could have some level of involvement with the police chief, it will let the new police chief know in that process that there is a CRB in this city. Every state does not have them and every city does not have them, and I think it's a good suggestion. And if we needed to put it in a motion, I would hope not. I would hope that we try to figure out how we can be included in the process and not in an integral way that we gotta be there that frequent. if it's a visit before they get hired and come before us.
Well, there is a motion on the floor presented by Carlos Valdez. If you will, Ms. Guy, you have a comment or a statement?
Well, I was just gonna say that the reason I said anything about the review, the police officer reviews is because she has sent that email out several times, which they don't share with us who's doing it, but that would indicate to me they're having a problem filling all the slots. So that was the reason for my comment. If that's not the case, then they, you know, I think I got the email again today. So, you know, but I just think that everybody should be equally involved in this. We are equally members of this board. And it isn't difficult to do, as Lincoln said, it's not difficult to do. And it's interesting to see the people that are applying to be an officer. And, you know, without that filter that we had before, you know, they had already looked at all of them. So that was the only reason I said it.
I concur. There is a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Can we restate that motion?
If you will, Carlos Valdez, if you can restate your motion.
Yes, the motion is for a recommendation to the mayor for the CRB to be involved in the process of hiring the police chief, whatever that process looks like to her, just like we heard, not necessarily a decision-making factor, but being able to meet the candidates and provide feedback to her as we've been doing with the other law enforcement officials.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Board Member Carlos Valdez have made a motion in reference to the participation of the Citizen Review Board in the process of selecting the Chief of Police here for the City of Tampa, and whatever that may seem fit to give feedback, but the highlight is to participate in some form of fashion. Dr. Carolyn Collins has seconded the motion.
Mr. Chair, before we all vote, I'm not sure what we're voting on.
Okay.
It's a suggestion. I'm not sure why we're using this as a motion. It's a suggestion. I think we could ask someone to carry forward for us, but I'm not sure it's something we need to vote on, because I'm not sure what we're voting on. It's not a motionable item.
I'll take this opportunity to ask legal assistance. Is this request need to be in a motion fashion, or is this request need to be submitted in some other method?
Well, if the board would like to make a motion regarding any action for myself to take, or for TPD to take, it would need to be in the form of a motion to reflect in the minutes and the desires of the board. So it would need to be in the form of a motion. If the concern is you don't know what that process is that the mayor is going to take in order to hire the next police chief, I can understand that concern, that she has not identified what her process is to hire the next police chief, and that has not been made public. It just depends on what this board desires to do, or for me, the message to send to the mayor regarding the motion. That's up to the board.
So there is a motion on the floor that has been seconded in reference to the participation of members of the Citizen Review Board to participate in the selection of some type of process in reference to the chief selection of the next,
and again,
the mayor's selection of the next particular chief.
so it's more so for us to be part of the process as it relates to whatever that looks like for her. So if she wants to do a national search and she wants to do how we are doing the whole interview panels, then that's the process we go in, but at least that we can be at the table and provide that input. If the process is she wants to not do a national search and maybe have 2 or 3 individuals that she's looking at, then for us to have an opportunity to meet those individuals, more so like we did when Chief Mario Connor came on board, as well as the director of the CRA. There was a panel for community members and certain people to be able to meet the candidates and ask questions and whatnot. So that's what I'm looking for. I would like for it to be done in the via of emotions, because this is something that, the CRB, the entire board is agreeing to, and we'd like to see it done in a proper manner so it can get to her desk.
Well, and I apologize for the interruption. On the previous, when former Chief Mayor O'Connor was there was a time that the board was invited to meet with her to ask questions. That was a public meeting. So there was a process for the board to participate, to speak with the candidate. That was made known to the board. So if you're asking if that same process can take place, I could see what the process is when it is established by the mayor, and I can let the board know at that time what the process is.
That's why the motion is that we are recommending for her to come up with her own process and whatever that looks like for her. So if that's the case, how she wants to do it, then great. But I would like to make a motion so it can be communicated to her that it's a recommendation from this body.
Oh, she has to have her own. So I want to get clarification on what the motion is. So what you just said was that she determined what her process is to hire the next chief. She will have a process.
I think it's to have the mayor to please consider the CRB's involvement in the process. It's just a general statement for the mayor's consideration of the Citizens Review Board's involvement in the process.
And that's why I second it. It's not to tell the mayor what to do.
Correct.
It's whatever she's doing, just make sure the CRB is inclusive. It's inclusive of the CRB.
But can we make the motion in the form that Lincoln said? Because it's very convoluted if you're saying, well, whatever her process is, just that we would like
It's the same
CRB
thing.
would like to be involved in some form.
If you will, Carlos Valdez, if you want to accept the amended motion, Lincoln Tamayo stated, that's.
What was the original motion? Because I agree with you, and I thought that's what he
Move
basically was saying.
that Mayor Castor consider the Citizens Review Board's involvement in the process of selecting the next chief of police.
And I would accept that amendment to the motion.
And my second stand.
Let's pull that ripcord.
So we have an amended motion on the floor that has been second by Carolyn Collins. With no further discussion, we'll continue with the vote with the amended motion that's on the floor. All those in favor, please show by raise of hand. Any opposed? That motion passes. We will now continue with item 10, CRB staff reports and business. If you will, Ms. Guy, you made a statement earlier in reference to tabling this event to the next upcoming meeting, and we're within the timeline that we can do so.
I would request that this item be tabled to move to the next meeting, and it does fall in the guidelines of our approving it.
Is that request a motion?
It's emotional.
Is that, you're moving that we
Yes,
table?
sir.
Okay, I second that.
Any further discussion on the tabling of item 10 to next month's meeting? With no further discussion, we'll continue with the vote, with the motion on the floor. All those in favor, please show by raise of hand. Any opposed, please show by raise of hand. That motion passes. Item 10, CRB staff reports and business in reference to the annual report of 2022 is so moved to next month's meeting. Moving on to item 11, items continued. Doesn't appear that there are any continuation items on this agenda. We will continue with item 12 in reference to the announcements and new business. The proposed date will be March 28th, 2023 at Middleton High School, 4801 North 22nd Street, Tampa, Florida, 33610, 6 o'clock.
Do we know where that's going to be at Middleton? Is it going to be in the auditorium, or it's going to be, do we know where yet?
Find out.
Kamaria Pettis-Mackle from the legal department. It's going to be in the auditorium.
In the auditorium?
Yes, ma'am.
The cafeteria is not conducive to that. Thank you.
And that would be considered the off-site CRB meeting for District 5?
Yes.
At this time, before I adjourn this meeting, I will give this opportunity to the board to add any additional statements, comments, concerns. If so, please do so now. Oh, I apologize. I do have an item, I'm sorry, for CRB staff reports and business. And we have done this before for a member of the CRB body staff as a suggestion to create a letter for the family of Robert Irvin in recognition and acknowledgement for his services on the board and such. If the board wishes to make a motion, the chair is open for a letter to be established. I believe Ms. Kamaria Pettis-Mackle has delivered such a letter in the past if the motion, if the
I'll
board
make the
wishes to do
motion.
so.
To send a letter to Mr. Irvin's family.
Second.
So,
With no further discussion, we'll move into a vote. All those in favor, please show by raising hand. Any opposed? That motion passes. This meeting is adjourned.
I didn't know he